Community Renewal Fund. We have a number of speakers this afternoon from the DWP, Tony Wilson from the Institute of Employment Studies, and a contribution from someone I'm sure you all know, Sam Windert. So we will just let these final few people in. I could do some housekeeping. If the group doesn't get too large, we will it would be good to have some cameras open. There's nothing better than the black screen. We will spotlight the speakers. You will notice the meeting is being recorded, and by joining, you're giving consent for ERSA to record this. If you don't want to be on the recording, that is a very good reason for turning off the camera and only being in the chat box. We will take questions by people raising a hand. It is worth me pointing out that this is a competition, and therefore our speakers from the DWP will not take questions this afternoon, but I'm sure we can have some discussion later and with questions to Tony Wilson and some joint dialogue around the competition and the role of the sector in all this. So I think we are now ready, and I'd like to welcome Louise Parker and Charlie Barracliff, who are from the DWP's UK SPF Stakeholder Strategy Enhanced Employment Support Team. That's quite a mouthful. Anyway, over to Charlie and Louise. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. Yeah, so I'm Charlie Barracliff. I work with Louis on Louis Parker, DWP's UK SPF strategy team, I suppose, and we're sort of mainly focused on stakeholder engagement and stakeholder planning, or kind of engagement planning, which, yeah, hopefully will ramp up as we move through 2021. Yeah, just to reiterate what Elizabeth has said, the intention really is hopefully to give like an overview of the UK Community Renewal Fund today, and I don't mind taking questions at the end. I think the issue is whether or not I can answer them in terms of my knowledge of the fund, in terms of very technical knowledge, and also if there are questions that haven't been asked already, I will have to clear them with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, who of course are leading on the fund, because we're here, I suppose, today representing MHCLG as much as we are representing the UK Community Renewal Fund. So I'll run through a PowerPoint, not to be boring and not to kill you by PowerPoint, but just because I think that keeps me on message. And then if there are questions at the end, then we can take those, or perhaps we can have a bit of a discussion about those. And then any questions, perhaps if there are questions that I can't field or can't answer today, it might be best if Elizabeth is happy to do this, if they were sent to a central place and then passed to us, and then we can get written responses to those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do that. Okay,
thanks. Right, I'll just spend the usual 30 seconds shuffling to try and get something to show on the screen. And if it's okay, I'll present it from a PDF, which again, and do let me know if you can see it, or if somebody just says that they can.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, jolly good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'll turn my face off briefly. So, okay, so here we are, UK Community Renewal Fund. Just a bit of context for this fund. And I think I kind of have to say this because MHCLG aren't here, but I think this is part of a wider package of local growth funding that was announced at the budget in March. So alongside the Levelling Up Fund, which came into effect, or comes into effect at a similar time, and then the Community Ownership Fund, which I think is a bit further down the line. Yes, this is as part of the UK government's commitment to the Levelling Up agenda, which partly links to COVID-19 and economic recovery in the wake of the pandemic, but also just a broader commitment to local economic growth and trying to support areas particularly in need. I can send this just before we go any further. I will send this. This is publicly available. This slideshow. I'll make sure that you can get it. So please excuse me if I skip through before you're finished scribbling notes or like. Okay. Yes, a general overview. So again, you might be familiar with the public lines on the UK Community Renewal Fund, but it's £220 million of additional funding over this this financial year to help us move smoothly from one in this kind of transitional period between EU structural funding and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is introduced from next year. Yeah, the theory is to pilot programs on new approaches that may then become part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund or may not, depending on a number of factors. And just to clarify the kind of the split of the fund broadly, or the vast majority is not really to do with capacity. Broadly, it's to do with piloting, but there is a small amount of money, relatively small, £14 million of the fund, which is reserved to support the certain areas in particular to increase their capacity in preparation for UK SPF from next year. And just a caveat, we always have to add this caveat, but the UK Community Renewal Fund is place-based interventions, but UK SPF from next year is a very distinct fund. So although this fund is to help support the introduction of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, it doesn't necessarily set precedent in terms of the design, the eligibility, or the duration of the next fund. This is a one-year standalone fund, which is supposed to support in preparation, but they might be very different. Okay. Just in terms of the investment priorities, and again, apologies if you're very well versed in this. I'm not trying to teach you to suck eggs. I just go through it in the order it's given. The four main investment priorities, which are skills, local business, communities and place, and then obviously the one that the Department for Work and Pensions is most interested in, which is supporting people into employment. They're not ring-fenced, these investment priorities. So in theory, we're not looking for a 25% split each way. Funding could fall. It probably won't, but it could fall predominantly in one rather than the other three, or it could be an uneven split depending on the bids that come in. And 90% of all funding that is available through this fund is revenue fund. And just that standard caveat, which I think has caused a little bit of frustration. The interventions or the pilots are supposed to be financially complete, by which I mean all funding delivery should be concluded by the 31st of March 2022. So all money must be spent by the end of March 2022 for the next financial year. So the UK Community Renewal Fund's delivery and distribution of pilot funding, it's all places are eligible, but there are 100 places, which I'll go on to in a minute, but there are 100 places which have been prioritised based on an assessment of need, which I'll come on to in a minute. This is a competitive process, as we've alluded to already. And lead authorities are basically in the driving seat for inviting project proposals from local applicants, perhaps such as yourselves. So lead authorities, which are local district councils, they're the lower tier borough and unitary geographies. So there is a list online. I'll put the link in the sidebar in case you're not familiar with who your lead authority would be for an application. Lead authority should appraise bids. So the lead authority in each area should be appraising bids received and producing a shortlist, which is submitted to the UK government, up to a maximum of £3 million. So one lead authority's total bids can only reach a maximum of £3 million. In Northern Ireland, I'm assuming this is not relevant to anybody, so I'll skip over the bits that refer to Northern Ireland specifically, unless people would like me to address those. And all funding decisions will be announced from late July this year. I won't do this. This alludes to the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Okay. So although this funding is open to all places, just as I'd said already, 100 priority places have been identified based on an index of economic resilience. This does not mean that organisations that fall outside these priority places should not be bidding. Again, it depends on the bids which come in, but 100 priority places have been identified. So they'll just, if two identical bids came in and one was from a priority place and one was from a non-priority place, it's likely the bid from the priority place would take precedent. But again, it depends on the quality of the bid. But the index it's transparent. A methodological note has been published on the landing page of gov.uk, which I will share the link for. So the lead authority in each of the 100 priority places will receive capacity funding. So that's where the capacity funding comes in. So a portion of that £14 million will also go to some of the lead authorities in the 100 priority places. Okay, I don't think and I suppose this is more for context for the people here today rather than direct information. But so lead authorities for each place across Great Britain, the role of a lead authority is as follows. So they're supposed to be inviting bids from organisations such as yourselves in an open bidding process and using a standard application form that is available on the gov.uk website. An open bidding process is part of the gateway criteria. Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to work out which bits are. So the aim is that the lead authorities are supposed to be engaging constructively with, again, organisations such as ERSA and the membership organisations there. And then they will appraise and shortlist the projects and then submit on behalf of their place to the UK government for assessment. The deadline is the 18th of June this year. The lead authority should also be considering collaborating with other lead authorities. So in theory, for cross-border, if you like, cross-border projects and their legal obligations, recognising MHCLG's role as a joint data coordinator and controller. Just continuing there. So following the bidding process, the UK government will enter into a funding agreement with successful lead authorities, who in turn will issue agreements to successful bids, project applicants, and then the lead authorities will undertake monitoring and assurance activity with the applicants for those projects. There are technical notes available online for lead authorities, but again, that might be less relevant for the people in attendance today, except for context. I'll skip past these, but I can always come back if we want to. Okay, so this is, I suppose, the bit that's a little bit more relevant to people here today. So project applicants, so this could be a number of different organisations, for instance, but all bids should be made to the UK community using the UK Community Renewal Fund's application form, which is available online and features guidance on how to fill this out. A technical note, which I'll allude to, got a couple of comments here, for project applications, applicant/deliverers is available online as well. So it outlines, for instance, who can apply. That includes, for instance, that's any legally constituted organisation can apply for a pilot or for funding. This includes private sector organisations and charities if they are providing service to benefit other organisations rather than just themselves. And consortium like consortia bids, if you like, of organisations grouped together to make a bid are also acceptable, but a lead applicant must be picked to fill out the form, etc. For ease of accountability, I suppose. So that's who can apply. How to apply? Again, it's done through this central application form, and then the lead authorities will submit the bids to the UK government on behalf of the place. Who can receive support? Again, this is all in this technical note, but I'm just trying to clarify. So anybody located in the UK is eligible, and then there are a list of criteria, but it's quite broad. I mean, for instance, non-UK citizens are also eligible as long as they fit on a certain meet certain criteria. For instance, they're in the European Economic Area with settled status. They could be Irish citizens working in the UK. Asylum seekers, for instance, with permission to work in the UK, etc. So it's quite a broad. So most people can benefit from UK community renewal funding. And then what the fund will support. So again, it's projects which meet those investment priorities which I touched on earlier. Projects which cost up to, which can spend the money before the 31st of March 2022. Again, that's quite key criteria. And revenue funding. Broadly, projects which are revenue funding as opposed to capital costs, although some capital costs as part of a wider project package would be considered. So there could be that's sort of open for discussion. In terms of branding, there are requirements that the UK government logo is used on communications between, for instance, project applicants and their target beneficiaries or audience. There are state aid and subsidy control compliances that need to be met, or obligations that must be met. Again, that goes into more detail in the technical note for project applicants. Monitoring and evaluation will be conducted, and again, more information is available in the technical note, but this will be in conjunction with the lead authority in the area. There are a list of excluded activities. Well, it's not extensive, but there are a list of excluded activities, and match funding is encouraged, but is not mandatory. So the UK Community Renewal Fund could cover 100% of the project costs. Again, I'll move on now, and then we can come back if there are questions. Just to briefly explain the assessment of the bid. So it will come into the UK government, probably via the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And they will assess, or they will triage, if you like, the assessment of these bids. The fund's assessment criteria is available online. Again, we can talk about that perhaps shortly, but there are a list of gateway criteria, 9 gateway criteria which confirm that the bid can be assessed and can receive funding, and then selection criteria after that, which then provides a score. And as we'll go into in a second, the scores will determine the likelihood of success of a project. If a project is a priority place, they must score a minimum of 50% against each strategic fit, whereas if they are from another place, it will need a score of 80%. So if a project is being bid, or a bid is being made for funding from a non-priority place, it will simply need to score a higher score on the index. Okay. Again, we're getting into the realms of quite technical. Appointable projects will be grouped into 3 bands. So band A, obviously, are the highest scoring, so they score 80% or above it on both strategic and deliverability, effectiveness, and efficiency scores, and they focus on priority places. Band B is similar but may not be on a priority place. It may be from a non-priority area. And then Band C, projects that scored 50% or above, and predominantly focus on priority places. again, we're getting quite technical, so I'll skip past. But if people have questions about this, we can come back and focus on the assessment criteria. But just to clarify that point in bold, ministers can exercise discretion to ensure a balance of type and spread of projects across Great Britain. So, yeah, in theory, there are opportunities for certain ministers of the UK government to ensure there is a spread of some kind of projects so that not all concentrated in certain areas. And that relates to Northern Ireland. UK government departments will be working together to assess bids, but final decisions to approve or reject bids will be made by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So although, for instance, the Department for Work and Pensions will be involved in the assessment of the employment bids, fundamentally the final decision lies with MHCLG as they are accountable for the fund. Okay, and this, I suppose, is where a little bit more on terra firma. So just to reiterate, I think what I said at the beginning, this is a £220 million fund from the UK government for 1 year to help places prepare for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. It will help to inform the design of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, but the funds remain distinct. They remain distinct. So decisions or delivery models that have been used for this fund may not be delivery models that are used, for instance, for the fund from next year. We have the main strategic elements of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund already. Those are published. Those were published in line with the spending review in November 2020. And we are awaiting, or we're in the process of developing an investment framework for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which will be released hopefully before recess, parliamentary recess in the summer, late spring, early summer, I don't know. And then we'd get multi-year spending profile, which will be outlined at the next spending review, which again is sort of penciled in for autumn, but that's a civil service autumn, so could flex a little bit. And yeah, that's where we are. £14 million of the UK Community Renewal Fund is being used to help local areas prepare for the UK SPF. And just before I go on to broadly our delivery timeline, which I think I've just for the UK Community Renewal Fund. So 3rd of March, we released the prospectus, which is available online. Now we've moved, I suppose now the next thing we're looking forward to is the 18th of June, which is the deadline for bids to be submitted by lead authorities, the shortlist of projects submitted by lead authorities to the UK government for assessment. Then in late July onwards, we would start to announce successful projects and release the first tranche of funding to lead authorities. And then we'd obviously be looking forward to the second tranche of funding being in the first quarter of 2022. So I think, with the exception of just outlining, and again, I'll talk about this a little bit more perhaps later, but this is a list of documents that are already available publicly. If you're not aware, the prospectus for the fund is already published. These are all on the same landing page, which I'll share. That this is the link here. A list of the places and lead authorities, so the priority places and the are in there, but also the list of lead authorities in Great Britain. Their methodological note, which explains how we've come to the list of 100 priority places. The application form, which you can use to submit bids to your local, your lead authority in your area. The technical note for just explaining the process for project applicants and deliverers such as yourselves potentially. And then the assessment criteria, so how the bids will be assessed when they by the UK government. So this is the link. I will share this. I'll share this in the sidebar. I'll share this with Elizabeth at the end. I think that is me. Now, as I say, I am happy to take questions. I will know the answers to some of them and will be able to answer them. I may not know. It might be, they may, as I say, they may be slightly too technical because we didn't work on the development of the very technical responses. That's been MHCLG, but or it may be a case that the question hasn't been asked and therefore a public response hasn't been determined. So I may need to go away and get a response that will get added then to the FAQs which are online. But I am very happy to take any questions and I'll see what I can do.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. I can see that we've got some questions in the chat, which of course these will be collated by ERSA, and we will put out a sort of response to those later in the week. But does anybody want to raise a hand at this stage and ask a question? And if possible, Charlie will answer it, and if not, Ursula will take it away. Nick Parker, I can see you've raised your hand. You want to come in, Nick?
Oh, hi, I was pointing at the ceiling. I did put it in the chat room. I suppose what worries me, and we're writing a bid, is you're saying that further guidance is coming out on evaluation and monitoring and requirements. I mean, we currently manage a BBO and we've got a huge team doing that. You've always said this is going to be less. But how much less and how light touch, because that will shape the amount of staff resources we need to actually monitor this. I know it's difficult for you, but it'd be nice to have an idea about how you see that sort of process required about justifying funding, or to confirm what money's been spent, and participants' eligibility, and also the outcomes. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that, Nick. I just wonder whether you could, when you're saying the outcomes, can you just confirm a little more what you mean? What project? Sorry, just.
So gone.
No, I just be interesting to know which what specifically you're looking for from the next publication.
From the UK Shared Prosperity Fund.
Are you referring to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund?
Not the UK Community Renewal Fund. Sorry, so much stuff in my head.
Yes.
So at the moment, I mean, we're looking at some of the employing, getting people closer to the workplace and stuff like that, training. So again, the sort of evidence that you're requiring for that, particularly, I suppose, more so the eligibility, when it can become quite burdensome and take quite a lot of time, and then checking that. And obviously, the lighter the touch, the more time you can spend actually delivering and supporting people. And the government's quite rightly recognised that there was too much bureaucracy with European social funding. So I suppose it's just assurances that it really is scaling back. So we're not packing out projects with management and administration staff. So how much more guidance will come out, how quickly, because we just need to understand that, really.
Okay, that's very helpful indeed. I'll take that back and make sure that I get you a firm response. My understanding is that it is relatively light touch, that we're looking for sort of, so in a bid for employment, for an employment related bid, we're looking for broadly the intended number of people that you'll be looking to move from near to the labour market to in the labour market, for instance. And then, yes, it would be based on relatively simple measures and relatively simple evidence base.
Yeah.
And that is an attempt to reduce what could be quite difficult or quite burdensome administration. Yes, but I will. You're absolutely right. I will seek more clarity on the guidance.
No, and that's welcome. So thank you very much.
Okay, would anybody else? Yeah, we've got Benjamin and John Bell. So Benjamin first, please.
Yes, hello everyone. So yeah, I posted my question in the chat. I think I'm a bit different case from everyone here, but I was wondering, I'm working in an NGO right now, a European NGO, and we got a technology that we are looking to scale in the UK that can help public employment providers as well as private employment providers. And I was wondering if this fund could be the right fit for us. Could we apply to it, as we are not directly serving job seekers, but that we could serve through partnerships?
Yes. Do you mind asking? So you're not directly serving job seekers. Who are you directly serving?
I mean, we are serving job seekers, but through a technology. So the aim would be to provide the technology to the organization so that they can further support job seekers.
So yeah, I think that would work under an investment priority. I think that supports the supporting people into employment, but probably also the supporting other organisations' investment priority. So I think that could. That sounds like something that would be perfectly eligible under this fund.
Because to give a little bit information to, because I might not be really clear, we've created this technology that is powering a website at the moment, and we won the Nesta Career Tech Challenge. And as part of our scaling, we really want to make partnership with the local employment providers, as we know that they will help us have more reach and have more scale in the UK, rather than do the things on our own, in our own site.
Yes.
Question.
Yes, I think the challenge will be to make sure that the fund doesn't look like it's just to extend the reach of the organisation and just to benefit the organisation. So you would have to make it, as it would be, about extending the reach and extending the target audience and extending the number of beneficiaries, for instance. But an existing project, changing the nature or changing the scope or changing the quality of an existing project using the funding to reach a larger number of beneficiaries is an acceptable use of the fund.
Okay.
I can also see some information in the chat from Matthew Forsyth that may be of interest to you, Benjamin. So I'd refer you to that. And if we could move on now to John Bell.
Yes. Hello. I've got a eligibility question.
John, we can only just hear you.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
That's good. Okay, sorry, my headphones weren't working. Have an eligibility question, which is this. Our analysis shows that one of the key issues in the local labour market and for local societies is not just unemployment, but is in-work poverty. And we're all aware of 0 hours contracts, of a number of people in insecure jobs, and not least a lot of people that have been through previous employment programmes have just started on new jobs and need support to be able to maintain that sort of employment. I can't see anywhere in the specification at the moment that would allow those sort of people to be addressed by this fund. There's obviously the journey to employment strand, but that's all about the unemployed. And there's the skills strand, but that's very much couched in terms of local labour market needs and what employers are looking for. There's nothing that specifically targets some of the most marginalised people in society at the moment, who are the in-work poor. Can you confirm, Benjamin, whether that is indeed the case and that's an anomaly and we can't cover them, or is there a means for that group to be included as at least some of our participants? Thank you.
Yeah, if I get your question right, we are catering for all type of job seekers, and we are trying to help job seekers who are further away from the market, such as low income or low wages people. And the aim is really to partner with, like I said, with the entities and to help them in their everyday mission to cater for more job seekers. So I don't know if I answered well your question.
I think my question was directed more towards our colleague from the Department of Pensions rather than you.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. It's slightly strange because, of course, the investment priority is supporting people into employment, but that could be, in theory, that could be from one employment into another employment, or it could because employment is mentioned as an indicator subset in the technical note to project applicants and deliverers. So strictly speaking, the target audience could be a group of employed people who were being, as you allude to, could be upskilling or reskilling, or it funding could, in theory, be to support, to support a change in circumstances, or to support a change or a move from one form of employment to a higher paid form of employment. In theory, that is supported by the investment priorities.
Excellent. That's very good to hear. Thank you for that. Can we have that in writing?
It is. I can give you a link to the place where but it does say in the technical note, it says that one key main indicator could be people who are already employed, which means that yes.
Okay, so
I can't guarantee the success of certain projects, but I can, and the success of certain bids, but certainly moving people or upskilling people or moving people from one form of employment to another form of employment should be supported by them.
From one to another, that's the crucial bit. That's great. Thank you very much indeed for that.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on to Linda Parkey?
Yes, hello. I'm from the Royal Association for Deaf People. Given the disability employment gap, and the difficulty that people with disabilities or long-term health conditions have in accessing the labour market, is there any priority within this funding to projects that will support people with disabilities?
I will need to check that, Linda. My understanding is that it's broader, so it's not. I don't think it is there's sort of a ring-fenced or a specific area that focuses on disabilities, but certainly there will be. If for instance that were because this is a place, I suppose because this is a place-based fund, it may be, and I can't make any promises one bit, but it may be possible to get that under a local strategic priority and justifies in that regard, or it may not. So in short, certainly that is something that could be funded or could be eligible for a successful bid, but I can't guarantee obviously the success of a bid, but it would have to be included under a specific investment priority. So you would have to link or justify the beneficiaries, or the benefit of the pilot under one of the investment priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So do we have any more questions for Charlie now, or shall we just Carolyn McConnell? Do you want to come in?
Hi, I am Carolyn McConnell. I'm on secondment from DWP to business in the community, and I've helped establish a forum called Sheffield Business Together that strategically connects sectors to help with some of the key city challenges. Funding is definitely not my forte, so I hope this isn't a silly question. But we run two programs that we're looking to scale, and it's linking businesses with schools to increase attainment and aspiration, because forum or encounters means kids are 84% less likely to become NEET. We're looking at scaling that and some voluntary sector brokering that we do, connecting businesses to share skills with charities. Would this, do you think, fall within the category of this funding?
I think that could perfectly fall into the category of funding. Again, it's a sort of preemptive employment measure to prevent people from moving into obviously into NEET status, and it's and the fund supports those. I think it obviously would have to be 16 or over, so this isn't for interventions necessarily before the age of 16. So in theory, yes.
Right, because we've already piloted this in a school and college in the constituencies of lower social mobility, but we're now looking to scale it. So, right, thank you. I'll have a look at this. I'm not sure whether we would fit the criteria, but we'll have a look. Thank you.
I just pick up on that and just say I think that scaling is a great word, and that, and again, I'm not encouraging people to use it this way, but I'm not discouraging established projects which could increase temporarily in terms of their the value they add, the quality they have, or the scope is probably quite a good way of using the UK Community Renewal Fund, because I think it might take less time to establish in a short time frame. It might be an option.
Thank you for that tip.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any more hands. I'm going to take this as those are all the questions. Charlie, there are questions in the chat which we will provide from ERSA to you, and if there are responses you can make, we can put out. So I think it's time to move on to Tony Wilson. So thank you very much, Charlie. Tony, are you ready?
Hi.
Hiya.
Yes, I am. Thanks, Elizabeth. And hi, everybody. Yeah, look, I'm not going to spend long at all. Actually, I've also got a presentation which I'll just share now. I'm conscious of the time, and I think we've got other people speaking too. But when I was speaking to Elizabeth and Laura at ERSA a few weeks ago about community renewal funds, we were discussing about how important it would be and what a great opportunity it would be to sort of bring people together and try to set something up to hear from people in the relevant departments as well. I asked if I might just do a quick plug for the sort of value and importance of good quality sort of monitoring and evaluation, and in particular, it's a little bit more background about what I think. What I think we might cover in the monitoring and evaluation part of bids, and then just finally, literally just a word on what I couldn't sort of take this opportunity without also just having a word on what I think good might look like, and some of the things that you might just want to think about in your bids around what we know about what works and what some of the big challenges are at the moment as we're facing this current phase of the crisis as we start to come out of lockdowns, but face really significant inequalities and disadvantages. Oh, how annoying. Dropped out then, didn't I? Hopefully you can still see my screen. Mainly I'm just going to talk about evidence and how we understand what works and what a good monitoring and evaluation plan might include, and then just a word on what good might look like. So why does evidence matter? Why does good evaluation matter? There's kind of four really important questions we're trying to answer. The first is, did the intervention work? And when we're trying to understand if things work, let's be honest, we're not going to have time to do this in the time we've got available, all the methods available in community renewal funds. But we're particularly interested in understanding, what was the additional impact of our intervention? Did it get more people into work or improve people's skills more than would have happened, without the intervention? So that's typically done through impact evaluations, and we also understand how things work by looking at the costs and the benefits and the value for money, if you like. We're also interested in how things work and why things work and who they work for. And these get much more into what we call process evaluation questions. And I think, to be honest, in something like Community Renewal Fund, are much more interesting and important. So trying to understand the context in which we're operating, how we can improve outcomes, improve performance, improve experiences and cost effectiveness. And what are the implementation factors that are most important in achieving outcomes? And what are people's experiences, of participants, of employers, of partners, of those who are delivering services? That final piece, who did it work for, is usually a combination of kind of impact and process. But I think, again, really important. I think in all these things, although colleagues from the department were keen to point out that this is not a prelude to the Shared Prosperity Fund, I think we all know it is really. And so I think the better that we can use this next year, it's not a year, but this kind of 6 to 9 months that we'll have for programme delivery, the better that we can use that to understand what's working, to understand what interventions may be most effective and what are the gaps that we can best fill with this funding. The more we can do that, the better, I would suggest. And so despite sort of 30 years of employment programme delivery and research and evaluation, and sort of and for me, 2 decades of doing employment policy and research, we've got a decent idea of what works. We have got a decent idea of what works, and you who work in service delivery have a good idea of what works as well. But there are really significant gaps in our knowledge and gaps that we can fill. Some of that is around what works for specific disadvantaged groups, And I think here in particular that there are specific groups who we might want to be targeting to support through the Community Renewal Fund, which could be, for example, care leavers, people who are leaving the criminal justice system, people who've got really significant health conditions, significant health conditions or disabilities that might make it harder to find work, where we do have quite significant gaps in our knowledge. I think there's also quite a lot we don't know about what affects successful implementation. Let's put it another way, why things sometimes work in some places and don't work in others. And I think that's something where we can definitely do a lot in the next year using Community Renewal Fund. But also, really importantly, I think we don't know well enough what success looks like when people don't achieve an employment outcome. And in most programs, most people won't achieve an employment outcome. So, we tend to measure success by talking about actually a minority of people who participate and what works for them. It's really important, clearly, that we're understanding whether those who don't get outcomes, whether they're moving closer to work. And this kind of gets into a whole debate, which many of you will be really well aware of and versed in, around distance travelled measures. And there's some of that in the technical note. There's actually quite a bit of that in the technical note for the Community Renewal Fund, about the sorts of measures that are more about improvements in people's employability, or their preparation for work, or their readiness for work. I think we also don't know a huge amount about impact, but we're not going to improve what we know about impact in the short timescales we've got here. So look, whether you commission, whether you talk to us at IES or talk to others, or indeed just do it yourself actually through on the evaluation plan. I think this is adapted from a paper we did probably about 18 months ago around what works for disadvantaged young people in particular, for the Youth Futures Foundation. But I think there's a lot of value in just stepping back a bit and thinking about a kind of an analytical framework for understanding what works. So when you're thinking about your evaluation plan in your bid, just have a think about how your intervention works and what sort of domains your intervention is trying to affect. How is it, for example, in particular, improving engagement? Who is it engaging with? How do you define, identify and reach those groups? How do you then enroll them? How do you get them into the programme? And what are the processes by which that happens? Who you're working with and not working with in order to do that? Delivery, almost all of our delivery in employment services and skills services as well is one-to-one, or it's one-to-many. But quite often it's one-to-one. More often, I should say, it's one-to-one. And so that role of advisory support, which I've written about quite a lot over the years, and very happy to sort of share slides if people are interested in it, and share research we've done. That advisory role is really important in how we're supporting people to plan, prepare and navigate employment markets, but also to maintain and build their confidence, to stay motivated, and to improve their sort of well-being, and broader kind of readiness for work and ability to engage with services and support. And then at the individual level, we're thinking about, there's two main dimensions here around improving people's capabilities, which is often thought of in terms of job specific versus more broader employment related skills for work, and addressing particular barriers that can make it harder to find work. And I think it was a really good question about retention and progression in work. I think this should be a far greater focus in what we're doing, particularly coming out of this crisis, where I think we're facing we avoided an unemployment crisis. I think we're facing potentially an underemployment one. I think it's really important that we're thinking about how we support retention and progression, how we engage with employers. Now, as you all know, there's a requirement for all bids to have an evaluation plan, where it's a monitoring and evaluation plan. Minimum spend, as we heard earlier, of 10,000 and a guide of at least 1 to 2% of the budget. At its most basic, I think we all know what this would look like, because we do it for you do it for ESF programs already. I say basic, I mean it's basic, but also pretty complicated. And one of the questions, Nick's question earlier was sort of making this point too, that actually we often have an industry of collecting data and reporting on sort of monitoring and reporting on outcomes, reporting on inputs, activities and outputs. So it's most basic, we'd focus on that reporting. And we'd be able to say this is what was spent and this is what was delivered. And fingers crossed, let's hope it'll be a lot less time consuming and bureaucratic than ESF reporting. But I think there's also a really great opportunity here to dive into understanding how interventions have worked, understanding for whom they work and understanding why they work and how we can make them better, and using that to get insights for future delivery, both for you and in potential future bids to the SPF, but also for commissioners, for the local lead authorities who are commissioning services to understand about how their services have worked within the context of local labour markets and client groups, and I would hope also nationally for MHCLG and DWP. And also, you know, we're talking potentially 400 programs here, won't be, but potentially it's like 400 programs we might have in the Shared Prosperity Fund. And with hundreds of very small evaluations going on at the same time, you know, surely there's an opportunity to try to bring this together a little bit, talk to each other, share learning and support improvements in practice. I think it'd be unreasonable to expect you to do that just in live running and delivery. I think it's the sort of thing that a good evaluator can do. It's also, I would hope, the sort of thing that government might intervene to do, but you know, it hasn't happened in the past. It has happened on BBO, Building Better Opportunities, to some extent. You know, the role that Chorus have played working with National Lottery. But I'd like to think we could probably do some, I mean, we collectively do some work to kind of support that as well. So look, this is the pitch. I say it's a pitch, but to be honest, my pitch really is just for all of you to really please consider, like, you know, having some element of independent and professional evaluation within your bids. I think actually, when I was, you know, we talked to ERSA about whether they might just host an offer from us about what that might look like. But I think actually, realistically, I would anticipate we would probably be involved in maybe half a dozen projects. Really keen to talk to people, and a few of the people on this call, you know, we are talking to about evaluating projects. Really keen to talk to people about how we can help and support with that. But our expectation is, you know, we would be a tiny fraction of the monitoring and evaluation activity happening across the provision. And there's tons of organisations like us who can do this too. So I do think, you know, so it's a plea really to really think about the positive benefit that research and evidence can play in helping to improve how services are delivered, improve outcomes ultimately, and improve value for money. What I would say, the 4 things we focus on would be action and research during delivery to understand what's working for whom. Reporting back to the lead authority and then ultimately back to MHCLG on what was delivered to whom, the outcomes that were achieved, and ideally being able to benchmark on these. What I would say though is I think actually the you know, the work of collecting data from participants is probably something which is better done within the programme rather than by an independent evaluator, simply because of some of the issues around sharing data and contacting participants and where those relationships are held. But I think you could definitely see the benefit in, for example, online surveys and mass data collection amongst participants as part of an evaluation plan, for example. Third point about an evaluation report, obviously, setting out what was achieved in the key learning. And then the 4th is, I would hope, this opportunity, if we are able to do a few, to kind of share learning with and to learn from each other about delivering these projects. Again, all for the greater good of making sure that Shared Prosperity Fund is even better. So if you're interested, you can drop me a line, drop my colleague Olivia Garner a line, who's been holding the ring on this too at our end. And finally, just because I've got you all here, you know, we can all focus. Well, it's impossible. We've got so many different sorts of projects we're delivering. But I was thinking, what are the sorts of things that would really matter coming out of this crisis? I think there's 4. I mean, and actually, a lot of these are sort of immutable. These are things that apply at any point in time. You know, just making sure we're relentlessly focusing on the individual and supporting individuals and doing what individuals want and what they need. That we're not just thinking about our products or our services, but we're thinking about how we maintain confidence, rebuild confidence, maintain contact, rebuild confidence, and help the whole person. And how, you know, and this isn't just about work, although work is clearly important, or skills for that matter, there's clearly important aspects. Secondly, clearly, we're entering a whole new world, I think, of kind of partnership working, where we've got an enormous amount of appetite now from in Job Centre Plus and in central government for greater partnership working. But we don't really have kind of any particularly well coordinated approach to local planning to enable that. You know, it does feel very piecemeal and disjointed and disparate across different funding streams. But look, you know, there's a real opportunity here to use provision to better join up services and bring partners together. I really hope local government will be able to and be resourced to take the lead on that, but I think we can all play a part. I think we really must tilt the scales in the favour of the most disadvantaged, and too often in the past, you know, we've had programmes that have been on paper around supporting disadvantaged groups, but have tended to reach the people that we always reach and the people who are most likely to volunteer for support. So that really does mean, I think, a really, really important focus on how we identify and engage with people, particularly at this time, where we've got a lot of people who are digitally excluded at a time when you know, we've got still quite significant restrictions on our travel and our ability to go out and meet people and to engage with services. It also means really effective coordination again. And finally, I think we've also got an opportunity and a lot of challenges in how we engage with employers. This means ideally trying to break out of the individual silos of our specific relationships around job matching and brokerage and trying to have a more partnership-based approach. And again, trying to coordinate that as best we can and thinking about the role of local partners and local services in doing that. So that's all I'm going to say. But here's my email address and my Twitter handle. So thank you. I'm really happy to be part of a discussion and time we've got left as well about how we can make a success of Community Renewal Fund. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. Does anybody else want to come in to discuss how we make this a success? I'm also very interested in people's observations about how the pilots are going to get evaluated in time to influence the Shared Prosperity Fund. So if anybody wants to raise a hand and come in, I did mention Sam at the beginning, and that was a bit of a misunderstanding that my colleague Laura had asked her to contribute. But of course, we always like a contribution from Sam Windert. So if you want to come in, Sam,
I think you were thinking Sam. I was giving you
great to hear from you now.
It was a surprise to me and everybody else. But do you know what? I was scribbling notes, and I'm always willing to give a viewpoint because I've been looking at people's comments in the side as well. So we know, I mean, the shame about this is that we obviously knew this situation was coming sort of when we started working on the end of European Social Fund sort of 3.5 years ago. It's just such a shame that this is such a rushed period of time. It feels quite clear to me when you look at it that this is a small pot of sort of top up funding as ESF ramps down, as ESF ends, and Shared Prosperity starts next year. They've got a gap, and they've put this 220 million into this gap. But this 220 million, when you look at it, it can green up small businesses. Businesses can look at becoming more energy efficient in those 6 months. It's about improving green spaces. It is also about encouraging entrepreneurs to take on new staff. It's also it's about rural connectivity. So to me, it feels like all the big things that government sort of wants to do but doesn't have time to do is being shoved into this £220 million pilot. For me, the risk of this to the sector is obviously the ramping down of the European Social Fund. Seeing this in the lens of the European Social Fund projects, you can see that that's been reflected in the spec, right? They've got some of those elements in there in supporting people into work, also in the upskilling bit. But the time frame, I mean, everybody said it. The time frame, once you've set, it does have a focus on innovation and new initiatives, to innovate and have a new partnership and set it up and to live run and to evaluate and to close it down by March 2022. I can't see how many organisations are going to say that's possible. But looking at the spec, and I'll be interested in other people's views, I think it's a good opportunity if you were going to pilot something in a new area, maybe. So you've got something, you want to extend it into a different area, and it's on the lead authorities sort of priority areas list. So you've got something established, but you want to stretch your footprint, and this will be funded. Well, I would possibly dabble in that. If it's about scaling, even Charlie said it, scaling an existing initiative to expand it, that could be a good route through this funding. My biggest worry is that it won't be appealing to a lot of the sector with everything else going on, all the different programs that are flying around. And if this does feed into Shared Prosperity Fund, which to me is a bit of a question because the framework for Shared Prosperity Fund is coming out, as Charlie said, before recess. But if this does have an impact, and not many organisations from this sector step forward and say, I want to bid for this pot of money, does the Treasury, does the Department for Education, does the Department for Work and Pensions say there isn't really much demand for these programmes? We're not really seeing much innovation. We're not really seeing many people come forward. Is there really that much that we need to do in that area? That's to me the biggest risk. If there's lots and lots of businesses saying, I really want to have greener printers and photocopiers in my business, and I'm going to put my funding bid forward, and they get lots of funding for that, and the employment sector really doesn't, there isn't a lot going on in it, does that reflect into the Shared Prosperity Fund, and how much of that money would be put towards those individuals that would need it? So obviously, from our perspective at Impetus, we've got to focus on the neat young people. As more and more government initiatives are focused on universal credit, so young people in job centre, these kind of programs and initiatives are even more important than ever. And I think that, you know, if it could be used to scale, if it could be used to pilot, I question whether piloting with new partners in the way that it's set out in the prospectus is possible. But if it could be used in some kind of way, it could provide that stopgap. It could provide a useful base to get some funding. We've launched 2 dashboards that should be useful for the sector to do that. They break down NEET rates by every single local authority in England, by disadvantage and quantification level for the first time. Everybody in the sector can use these dashboards to look at their own local authority and what the NEET population looks like in their area. We've also made sure that those have got into the hands of every local authority leader. And we've also sent them to MHCLG to inform, you know, some of their discussions about the Community Renewal Fund. So we are pushing. We also have Charlie coming to the Youth Employment Group meeting tomorrow, because I think, Elizabeth, it's really important that the sector does think about it and thinks about what they could do, but it is incredibly difficult and quite constrained, I think.
Okay, thanks, Sam. See, I knew intuitively that it was right to bring you in, so thank you for that. I can see people in the chat, but also I can see 3 hands raised. So I can see Nick Parker, Gavin Owen and Linda Parkin. Shall we go in that order? Nick?
I'll be really quick. I mean, Sam, you sent something there about the government not seeing the value of this funding for supporting people into work. And I suppose ERSA's done that forum for Kickstart. So if there was a similar forum for people delivering this, for ERSA with other people to collect their evidence as one, then maybe it's more visible rather than little pepper potted bits of evidence going back forward. So maybe it's a call out for yourself and Elizabeth to put together a forum to do that.
Yeah, well, certainly from an ERSA point of view, we could be very keen to do that. So we will take that up, and we will look for contributions and leadership from others to join us in doing that. So great suggestion, Nick. Gavin Owen.
Thanks, Liz. It's just on Sam's point about there not being an appetite for it. If a lot of them aren't funded, I suppose then that is the lead councils, and if they are the gatekeepers to what is put forward to the government, it's about knowing what the lead councils have received locally as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the issue with the system that they put in place, which was one that back in the day we were very much lobbying against, weren't we, Elizabeth? A sort of bid-in system of the strong, you know, they have identified some priority areas, but there are so many different levels of decision making, and how do we ensure that it's fair decision making, that if you put a bid in, what's really, you know, what feedback are you going to get on it, and how are they shortlisting? From what I read, it wasn't quite what Charlie said. Charlie said there wasn't any ring fencing. I do see that there's no ring fencing for initiatives, but it does say that there will, in the end, be a balance between those 4 areas. So how are they going to ensure that if they get lots of bids in one area, and they're better quality than the ones in another area, but overall they want a balance between those 4 priorities? There's a lot of difficulty and transparency in this process. To have a bid-in process was always the worst of all worlds, we felt, and hopefully, you know, we can still, if this is difficult for the sector, that we can influence some of the thinking still around the Shared Prosperity Fund.
Okay,
thanks. And is the dashboard on your website, Sam?
I'm going to put it in the chat now. I've got the link ready to post it in the chat. It's on the Impetus website, yes.
Great, thanks, Sam. Okay, can we have Linda and then Andy and then Michael?
Hi. One of the reasons we're looking at this is not because we think we can deliver a lot of job outcomes within the time frame, but because of it being a bridge to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And I share Samantha's concerns, which is, if we don't get involved with this, do we find ourselves outside the tent when UK SPF funding comes on stream? I mean, we've got to the point where we're actually prepared to write to all the local authorities and say, we're happy to work with your local consortium, and not even actually ask for funding, but, you know, to work in referral and training and other type partnerships, just so that we get a seat at that table for UK SPF funding, because we're concerned that, exactly as you say, that if we stay out of this one, there won't be an opportunity for next year's funding, whenever that comes out and whatever that looks like. I wonder if Samantha had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the Shared Prosperity Fund decisions are being set literally right now across the top directors in each department, which is where I would like a little bit more clarity from the government on, when they say these are distinct, they are distinct. How would one influence another? So what would have to happen in the Community Renewal Fund to feed into the decisions on the Shared Prosperity Fund? It's got to be a long lead in time on Shared Prosperity Fund, so those decisions really do need to be taken now. So but I do think there needs to show to be an appetite. There does need to be a lot of, you know, at least interest. The last thing I heard was that there were concerns in conversations with the Treasury that they couldn't quite see that there was clear need, that there wasn't duplication of other services. And I really think that's a key point, that it has, you know, this is additional to what the system provides. European Social Fund is all about what exists outside job centres and outside the sort of statutory employment system. So I think it's really important to show the value of these. I would quite like every decision maker in the Community Renewal Fund chain to have visited a European Social Funded project before they make any decisions on the shortlist. I would like that to be, you know, enforced.
We should be so lucky.
Yeah, good luck.
Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Andy. Okay, if we don't hear from Andy, are you here?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
Hiya.
Well, I unmuted myself and then somebody at your end muted me, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I was going to ask Sam if the data sets she was talking about were going to be made available to us anywhere, but I think she's partly answered that anyway.
They are absolutely available for you to play about with, cutting all the neat data by every local authority.
Yeah.
So there's a data set that sits behind our Youth Jobs Gap research, which we launched last year, and we always wanted to make it available to the sector to inform their bidding processes and also to local authorities and government. But this gave us a real impetus to publish it right now, because the Community Renewal Fund, you know, it really needs to be informed by what the NEET populations look like. So that is available. There's a link on the chat.
Okay, that's great. And I just wanted to say, I think both of your presentations have nailed it. I think this is because it's only 6 months. This is absolutely nailed on, that this is designed to be bolt-on projects. Projects that you can just extend, expand, do in different areas, add additional people to. So you've already got to be in the business of doing something very, very like this, I think, in order to get anything from it. And no organisation on the planet is going to take people on the basis of somebody being employed for 6 months. So you've got to have capacity as well within your organisation. I don't think this is very well thought out, personally.
Michael, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael. I'm CEO of Generation in the UK. We run training programs for unemployed people facing barriers to get them into jobs. We are very jobs focused, and my question was, there's a note in the briefing that says that this should be distinct from other funding streams which are out there, and obviously the Department for Education have started to create pots of money for specifically for boot camp style training provision, which is great to see. And we are in a position where we could scale up programs in different parts of the country, and that would be supported by something like this. And it would be distinct, it would not be double funding from what we've applied to Department for Education for. But I wondered if there was anything that you guys knew on, are they trying to keep programs like bootcamp style training program is more in the space of Department for Education, or does this type of fund also going to support that type of provision?
Ooh.
Well, look, I mean, boot camps themselves. I mean, boot camps themselves are obviously a sort of live area of development. One that the Department for Education, we're a bit conflicted, what I can say, because we're evaluating the boot camps. I'm not personally involved in that. I should say, but I think it's a live area for the department, and it's one that they're clearly very, very keen on extending. I think it seems to me that the CRF, that those sorts of interventions are clearly in scope for potential applications through CRF funding but it's with the constraints we've talked about. I mean, funding that has to scale up and wind down and entirely complete by 31st of March. It's not a particularly attractive proposition for kind of expansion, for new activity. Will that sort of thing be priority in Shared Prosperity Fund? I mean, my expectation is it probably would be, for the same sorts of reasons that kind of skills, workforce and workplace skills were a priority in ESF. But I do think, I would expect that boot camps will continue to be developed and led by DFE, and they'll look to, if they think that's working well, they'll look to do more of that in future.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
So I can see people are beginning to leave us. I think it's been a really useful discussion. So I would like to close with, obviously, with my thanks to people who've contributed, particularly to Charlie and Tony, and for Sam, who I put on the spot and came in with such good contribution. What I'd like people to do is think what else you want from ERSA at this point. I know Nick has talked about that future forum where we look at the sort of collaboration and a community of good practice gathering evidence, but what else do you want from ERSA now? So you don't need to raise your hand and say that. You can put it in the meeting chat. You can drop us an email to events@ERSA and just sort of prompt us in private. But it would be really good to hear from what else you want from us. And just to say, ERSA's work on influencing UK SPF continues. It will continue right up till the final stage, because the importance of that additional funding that we've seen from Europe for the last 30 odd years into the employment support sector has been crucial, will be really, really crucial going forward. So making sure we make the best use of the end of ESF and the future with Shared Prosperity is right up there, top of our agenda. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tony, as always. Thanks, Sam. I don't know if Charlie's still with us, but thanks, Charlie. We've got questions that we will send to you. And if anybody, yes, I can see people are asking if they can have a copy of the DWP slides. Yes, they can. Tony, is it okay to share yours as well? Yeah. And my colleague Laura will get those out. Okay. So have a great remainder of the afternoon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Elizabeth.
See ya.